Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Center Hub's continued series, college season preview series. I'm here today, Conrad Pascual, joined by Andrew Schaeffer, and the man, the myth, the legend himself, the mid-major maestro, Matt Kostoff, right? And today he's here to, really just kind of give us some insight into both the Atlantic 10 and the MAC conferences. So before we get started, gentlemen, how you guys doing?
Doing great, Conrad. Excited to talk to you guys. Two of my boys right here, talking two of the best conferences and two of my favorite conferences in the sport, with basketball season right around the corner. So super excited to do this.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm ready to talk A10 and MAC. These are two of the best mid-major leagues out there. Matt's worked really hard on this for the magazine, and I'm looking forward to diving in and discussing both leagues.
Okay, without much further ado, let's get started. We'll talk about the A10 first. Andrew, I know you have a lot on your mind, well, both of you. So why don't you kick us off?
So Matt, let's start with the A10.
Yep.
Really bunched to the top. Obviously, feels like it's pretty wide open. Just give your general thoughts, if you don't mind, on the A10, top to bottom. What have you found out from coaches and their interviews and that whole sort of thing? If you could just give a general overview for us.
Yeah, I mean, the A10, it's always a dogfight, and I think that's what all the coaches I've spoke to, they spoke on that. They said how hard it is to play at some of these places, like at Loyola Chicago, at UD Arena, how hard it is to kind of do those kind of things and stay in the race. Last year, I thought St. Bonaventure's was going to be one of the best teams in the league. I went to a game against Loyola Chicago. They got blown out by 30. I mean, I think that this league is just so competitive that there's so many good teams that they'd all just beat each other up. And fortunately, like last year, one team only gets a bid, which I hope doesn't happen this year. I think if anything, it's going to be a two-bid league. I really like VCU. I think the battle for the second bid would be between what people think St. Louis. I don't particularly think it would be St. Louis. I think it would be between George Washington, Loyola, or Dayton. But all just like solid teams at the top. Dayton's great. VCU's great. George Washington returned a bunch of guys. Castro, Player of the Year. Loyola Chicago is going to be disgusting this year with a bunch of new players, new faces. I really like what George Mason did last year. I think they won't be as good as last year because they lost some of their best players, but I think they'll be solid. St. Joe's, I mean, we'll see what happens with Donahue. They got a lot of good players as well. So, yeah, A10's going to be stacked. It's going to be a dogfight, and, yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Sorry, Conrad, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, good.
So there's a lot of change in this league, right? Coaches changed. St. Joe's obviously was like very recent.
Mm-hmm.
What do you, with the coaching changes that did happen, Fordham, LaSalle, Joe's, and VCU, what can we expect from those teams with the new coaches? Like, what are you expecting from that group?
I mean, I expect Donahue to do well. I mean, it was kind of put in place for him to take over and succeed because, I mean, LaSalle got kind of screwed over. I mean, you lose Deuce Jones to your neighbor at St. Joe's. He's going to be solid just like he was in his rookie year. St. Joe's also got a kid from Fordham, Jaden Smith, who I was high on coming out of high school in Chicago. I was a big fan of his. I think he was a 4-star, 3-star. Jaden Glover, former 4-star at St. John's. He's going to be exciting, super dynamic guard. He was also a 4-star in the portals. Then they also get Al Amadou from Marquette. I mean, I think it's going to be tough for them to win. I mean, they couldn't win last year with Rasheer Fleming, Xavier Brown, and Eric Reynolds. So I think they're going to be middle of the pack. But I think he's going to have the easiest transition out of the three changes. LaSalle, I don't really know what they're going to do in year two if year one was so rough and they just got a new coach. I think Fordham did a solid job in the portal. I mean, you bring in guys from lower majors who are going to prove themselves. I think Christian Henry was really good at Eastern Michigan last year. Zareek Nutter was good at Georgia State. I think people are saying that Dijor Reeves Friona, he might come in and be the newcomer of the year in the A10. And then another one who's exciting, Jace Howard from Michigan, son of Juwan Howard. So I think Fordham will be fine. But yeah, the coaching changes were really interesting as they were the year before with Josh Schertz.
I mean, ultimately, last year VCU got the bid, the tournament bid. But as you said, right, like it was like George Mason, they were there, right? They were all there till like the very end of the season. But like VCU, I mean, they, for example, as you said earlier, they experienced a lot significant turnover this past off season. I mean, how do you envision, like without giving too much away? I know that's part of what's in the magazine, but I mean, what is their outlook in being able to repeat? Because it seems, as you said, right, everyone seems to kind of be addressing what really kind of ailed them last season.
Yeah, I mean, we talked to Coach Martinelli, me and Steven. That guy is eager. He's firing on all cylinders already. He's a super serious coach just when you talk to him. I think that they're going to continue success. I mean, every coach who's come out of VCU in the past years has gone on to be successful there. I mean, you lose Shulga, you lose Jack Clark, a couple others like Russell. But I think what he's doing is he's going to be successful in year one. He brought back 4 guys from last year who probably didn't even know exactly who he was at Bryant, but they committed to him because they love VCU and they trusted him, and they're going to come back and play for him this year. And then also, like, look at what he's doing already in the recruitment with these freshmen. He's got Nick Lewis coming in this year, highest rated recruit in VCU's history. And then next year he's got 2 recruits, Sammy Jackson, Colin Ross, who are 4 stars. So that's, I mean, he's competing with these Power 5 schools and he's winning. I think the transfer portal class was fine. I mean, you got Hamid Noel, he was former top 30 nationally at UConn. 2 Bryant players he brought with him who have experience in March Madness now. They got Lazar Djokovic from Charleston. And then I think, I mean, it's a bit ridiculous to me that Blue Ribbon gave Tyrell Ward, an all-conference team pick when, I mean, he hasn't played in a year. You can't just – guy who was hurt last year and redshirted at LSU, just because he's coming from LSU doesn't mean he's going to be exactly who he was there. You know what I mean? But, yeah, VCU is going to be fun. I have them at number 1. And I know Blue Ribbon, I think they did it as well, where they had St. Louis at 1 and VCU at 2. So, yeah.
So, to me, the 2 sleeper teams in the league are GW and the Bonnies. I think those are the teams that, like, they haven't really done much recent. I mean, obviously, Bonnies went to the tournament a few years ago, but like last couple of years, they haven't done a ton. And then it feels like this year, both teams are really going to be competing for potentially an A10 title. Can you talk about those 2 teams?
Yeah. Bonnies, I really liked him last year. I followed Melvin Council from when he was at Wagner, playing against UNC, to when he got recruited to St. Bonaventures, and now he's playing at Kansas. I thought that dude was going to will them to a top 3 seed in the tournament for the A10. Didn't happen like that. I thought they had a good team last year with Chance Moore and Laje Jones, who's now at FSU. I don't know if they're going to be as good as they were last year. I think they'll be interesting. I mean, you saw what Woj said. He said, I want this to be a place where kids can come and projectile themselves into Power 5. Like, if that's the mindset you're going for, are you really trying to win? I mean, you kept Asante Bowen, who's going to be really good for them. He had some injuries last year, but he averaged like 11 points per game. And then, I mean, the super interesting one they got is that Joe Gahovic.
I love him.
Yeah, he's playing JUCO ball, and
love him.
He looks really cool. I don't know how he'll be in the A10, but we'll see. They'll be fun. Who was the other team?
GW.
Yeah. I really like them. I like Caputo. The super interesting thing about them is, they were good last year. I think they finished top 5 or top 6, but they return all these. They return Autry, Moss, Garrett Johnson is going to be unbelievable for them. I don't think people remember he was tearing it up his freshman year. I think he was easily one of the better players in the A10, averaging like 13 and 6 on 40% from both field and three. He's 6'8", dude. He was going to come back this year after an ACL tear and just tear it up. And then you put all those guys next to Castro, who's back, and Rafael Castro could easily go play Power 5. The fact that Chris Caputo got him back, as well as these guys who are contributors from last year, I mean, they're going to be a solid team. I just talked to him about it. He has 4 transfers coming in, and all 4 of the transfers that he has coming in, these guys were the best players on their teams, like Tarleton State, Western Kentucky, like leading scorers on both those teams. And then they bring in another Luke Hunger from Northwestern, who is a Canadian prospect like 3 years ago. So, I mean, he's putting together these pieces. He told me, he's like, those 4 transfers who come in, yeah, they were the leading scorers on their team last year, but they're not going to be the leading scorers this year. They're going to have a different role, and they accepted that, and that's why they're coming here. So, yeah, George Washington is my sleeper pick to make the tournament for March Madness this year.
A more of a macro question, but in talking to coaches from like other conferences, one of the things I keep hearing is like when I ask them, how do you assess the state of your conference, right? They always like to base their assessment on how kind of like the teams that are towards the bottom of the standings, right? Like the back end of the conference, right? I think that's a nice way to phrase it. In general, what do you think about like overall, like the strength of the conference in terms of, because, you know, as we look forward, you know, in terms of like how, you know, down the line, the community kind of assesses strength of schedule and everything like that. We know this is typically a one bid conference, but who knows, right? Like maybe someone could emerge as like, you know, kind of like those wild card entries, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I mean, last year it was 6, 7 teams, 8 teams who had 20 wins in the A10. I mean, after that, it kind of bottoms out. But I think what's going to be interesting this year about those bottom teams like Duquesne, they brought in John Hunley, who was from me being from Cleveland. I know he was one of the best players to come out of Cleveland in the last 5 years. And I mean, yeah, he didn't work out at Xavier and Oklahoma and all those stops, but you bring a kid down that level, one level to the A10, he might be the best player in the conference. Who knows? Coach Drew Joyce, he's sweet. He's going to probably bring a lot out of that guy. I like Davidson a lot. I talked to their coach. I'm really excited for their freshmen. I don't know if people know RJ Greer. He was a Ohio kid at Bishop Alter. Funny enough, his dad is the assistant coach at Dayton, so that's going to be a fun one when they play each other. And then Devin Brown, who went to Olentangy-Orne, he was one of the best players in Ohio last year, probably best winner in the state last year. So they got those 2 guys coming in, as well as a couple interesting pieces from like Virginia. They got a kid from Army who's super talented. Richmond retained a lot of players. I don't know if they're going to be good. I really like Coach Mooney. He's a good guy, but I don't know if they weren't successful last year with the same guys, what makes them going to be successful this year. But yeah, I mean, Rhode Island, LaSalle, they might struggle a little bit. UMass is gone now, obviously. But Fordham, I think, could honestly get in the mix with that top 7. I don't know what it is, but McBacco brought over some good transfers in his first year, in my opinion. So we'll see. I think it'll be a well-rounded conference. I think they're going to obviously beat up on each other. But, yeah, I only see 2 teams that don't belong right now, in my opinion.
So let's talk St. Louis. So you mentioned a little bit ago that you're not as high on them as maybe some other places are. Obviously, Avila's back. We know he dealt with some injury at the beginning of last year, and that kind of got them off to a slow start. They bring in Brady Dunlap from St. John's. Trey Green's coming in from Xavier. What is it about St. Louis that you're down on as compared to maybe other people who maybe have them in the top 2 in the league?
Yeah, I mean, what it seems like is St. Louis is trying to be, you know, like the mid-major Purdue, where they bring in a big guy every year. They got this kid named Jax Kerr coming in. He's a 4-star. I think they just center their offense too much around bigs. I mean, Avila yeah, he was sweet at Indiana State, but he wasn't playing competition like bigs like Castro or Emil Latong or Miles Rubin for Loyola Chicago. And he struggled last year, especially on defense. I mean, we all watched him in the first game of the season against Santa Clara, I think it was, where he got torn up by Christoph Tilley. I just don't think that he's sweet and all, like, yeah, he's like a little Jokic and he's got these rec specs on, and yeah, he was cool, but he's not a guy who's athletic enough to compete in the A10. I don't think that his weight loss that Josh Schertz said will make him that much better, because obviously injuries are a really big restraint for him, and his knees are just not up to par with what the A10 requires. But I mean, the rest of the team I love. I really like Kalui Anya who was there last year. He's kind of their glue guy from Brown the year before. Isaiah Swoop's gone, which is going to be really hurtful for them because he was electric, big time shot maker. Trey Green, he's a good point guard. He hasn't shown me much at Xavier, but that's a cool thing about the A10. They can bring in these guys from the Power 5 conferences who didn't maybe get their shot there. And I mean, yeah, he could easily be one of the better point guards in the league. I really like Brady Dunlap taking, the Gibson, the Jimerson's role from last year, just being a dead eye. That's a cool thing about Robbie Avila, though. Hate crapping on him, but that inside out game when he gets double teamed in the post and you can hit it out to Brady Dunlap or Dylan Warwick from last year and just spray threes. That's what St. Louis is going to be good at. And they got another kid I think who would probably be the best player on their team, Dion Brown. Great shot creator, great off the ball, good shooter. Averaged 7.5, I think, last year at Boston College. It's an ACC team, and he's averaging 7.5 coming to the Atlantic 10. That's no small feat. And he's averaging on 44% from field. And then the year before, he was at UMBC averaging 20 points per game. So I think that dude's going to be disgusting in the A10. Definitely a big sleeper that I think was in the transfer portal that they got a hold of.
You mentioned Robbie Avila, who I think like a lot of fans, even if like you're kind of a casual college basketball fan, like he's recognizable, right? Like I think, he's a fan favorite back from Indiana State, transferred to St. Louis, brought the magic with him. But who do you think is there anyone that's kind of emerged or do you think, I don't want to say emerged, but maybe like an early favorite for like conference player of the year? Someone who's kind of standing out, or someone who maybe is a transfer who you think could really claim that title?
I mean, I think easily Castro will probably get player of the year. I mean, he's just so dominant, basically a walking double-double. I don't know if he's going to be like that guy who's the Atlantic 10 guy who goes to the NBA. I think he's good for college. I think Miles Rubin from Loyola Chicago will be the guy who gets drafted from the A10 this year. Rim running. I went to the Loyola game last year. I think the dude had 6 alley-oops in one game. Incredible shot blocker. He's only a junior, averaging 10, 5, and I think 2.3 blocks or something like that on 70% from the field. I think he's easily going to get drafted next year. I don't know if he's going to be player of the year because there's so many mouths to feed at Loyola, but I think he's going to be really good. There's so much talent in the A10 that it's kind of tough to pick, but I think far and above Castro is my pick for player of the year in the Atlantic 10 for sure.
So I'm the toxic one here. So I'll ask a toxic question, which is who's
the least valuable player?
No, I won't go there. No, I feel like, there's coaching changes every year, right? In these leagues. And obviously I think Arch Miller's under a lot of pressure at Rhode Island. I don't know if you would agree with that or not. Is he the guy that, is under the most pressure, you think, in the league because of the lack of success that he's had there over the last couple of years?
Yeah. So it's funny. I'm a huge Dayton fan. I die for Dayton. And Arch Miller, he kind of shot himself in the foot. He thought he was too good for Dayton when they went on the Elite Eight runs, and then they beat Providence the year after that. I think his head got too big, and he went to Indiana and absolutely crapped himself. So I think he's trying to pick up the pieces at Rhode Island, and it's really not working out for him. He's definitely the number one guy on who'd get fired out of the A10 for sure. Because, like, I mean, think about everybody else in the league. St. Louis just got there. Mooney, maybe. I don't know if they'd fire him just because he's been there for so long. I think he'd probably see his way out before they fire him. Obviously, Donahue. I thought Lang was easily going to get fired after this year. I mean, especially after last year with all that talent he had. George Mason's got a great coach. Skin is sweet. Just won Coach of the Year. Valentine, Martinelli, and Caputo are easily the safest. Obviously, Martinelli's recruiting at a high level. So is Valentine, and Caputo's doing as much as he can and he's doing it very well. I don't see Dayton firing Anthony Grant anytime soon. He continues to produce NBA talent. So, yeah, I mean, that's the one thing about Dayton. Yeah, I love them producing NBA talent. I love Kobe Bryant, Deron Holmes, Tumani being in the NBA. But I think now is the point where he's realized he's got to produce. And I think it was good of them to like put together this new transfer class of guys who maybe are unproven to the A10I, like Malcolm Thomas out of Villanova, who didn't play last year. I think that kid's going to be a stud. I mean, any guy who has the balls to put on Obi Toppin's jersey after Obi, as the last person wearing it was Obi Toppin, is going to be a kid that I think I for surely believe in. And then they got Deshane Montgomery from Georgia. He didn't play as well last year at Georgia, but the year before he was at Mount St. Mary's averaging 13. Jordan Derkak from Rutgers, who was at Merrimack before. Bryce Hurd at NC State. And then I think Adam Jai will be unbelievable at Dayton. Anthony Grant's always had a way with bigs, but people forget that he's always had a way with Bronx, New York point guards. And that's where he's from. That's where Malachi Smith was from. That's where Posh was from last year. I think that he's going to be really good. And I also think that this is the most uncertain I've been about a Dayton team in a while, just because of how much turnover there was. Because last year we knew what we had. We had Nate Santos coming back. We had Malachi coming back, Javon Bennett coming back, Isaac Jack, Cheeks. And then you know what you have with Zed Key and Posh being fifth years, the experienced guys. I think this is going to be the most fun in a while that Dayton will be, just because of the uncertainty, because of these guys who are all gym rats, young people trying to earn their keep in the A10. And they have two sweet freshmen coming in with Damian Friery from Cleveland, who's a winner at St. Ignatius in Cleveland. Jaron McKee, son of former Sixers, Aaron McKee. And then I thought was really a sign that I think Anthony Grant believes in this team is when I think the last person out of the portal of recent was Keontae Jones he was at Cal State North, where he's just sitting in the portal all summer, and Anthony Grant goes and gets him. He averaged 13 points, and he was top 25 in rebounding last year. So you go get a guy like that, I think you believe in the team, and you think that they can probably compete. And Emil Latong's sweet. Obviously, everybody knows him, but
I was actually just about to ask you about Latong. As you were saying, right? Like Dayton, I don't know if that's like Anthony Grant's MO, but as you were saying, right? Like their point guards have like that kind of style where they like to really, really aggressively attack the paint, get like really deep paint touches. The bigs are like always like, kind of, I wouldn't say like always up tempo, but they run the floor. They're very like, above the rim kind of style. But Latang, like last year, he kind of started to very little, but he started to show some flashes of some shooting potential, some range. Any hints, in terms of like how he's going to be incorporated? Because as the season went on, he started to really kind of like, kind of have a direct impact. Like he was making his presence felt.
Yeah, he really started coming in his own at the end there. Obviously people didn't really know him coming into Dayton because he was right before the season started. He came in and Grant went and got him. He's ridiculous. I mean, just kind of a freak at like 7'1", so lengthy. I think he's better suited as that pick and pop guy. I don't know if he's strong enough yet to kind of bump around in the paint like a Deron Holmes did. I think his potential is being a stretch big who's going to be an ultimate paint guy on defense. He swatted just about everything he could last year. I think he'll be a second round pick easy next year if he decides to go. He loves Dayton. People were contemplating if he'd transfer, but he said that he likes it there and he has no problem. But he's a super fun person to watch. I don't know if you guys saw the TikTok recently. He had a pen pal, 88-year-old grandma who lives in a nursing home in Dayton, and they met each other. So that was cool to see. Just seems like a super nice kid, and Anthony Grant, I think we'll probably try and run the offense for him this year, if anything.
So Loyola, right? Obviously, a lot of expectations there. Porter Moser got them to the Final Four, a few years ago. I love Miles Rubin. I think he, like you said, I think he's got a chance to really be up there in the upper echelon of players, in this league. Can you talk about Loyola and kind of what you're going to see from them this year?
Yeah, I think Loyola is going to be super fun. They were a very fast-paced team last year. The games I went to, they ran the team out of the gym every time. It's just super fast, super quick offense. If they're not shooting threes, they're driving to the paint, trying to find Miles Rubin around the rim. I think it's going to be tough. Losing Jaden Dawson to Kansas and Des Watson was fun there and especially in the A10 and at Loyola for the past couple of years. But I mean, they bring in a cool recruiting class. I love Dalek Tavares. He was my guy last year. Going to Charleston, I thought he was going to be unbelievable, and he was at Charleston. Super confident shooter, super fun to watch. Gutsy kid who kind of wears his heart on his sleeve. I think he's going to be the guy next year. But also, I mean, Joshua Joseph, I think from Cal in Minnesota. That's a guy who averaged 3 years of 7.5 to 8 points, and now he's coming down to the A10 level. That only screams to me that he's going to go double digits, and he might lead that team in points per game. Because you're doing that consistently on a high level at the Power 5, Big Ten, and ACC. That means that you can play with anybody, and you can play in the A10 then for sure. Xavier Amos and Dominic Lewis were guys who, they killed at the mid-major level, averaging doubles at Northern Illinois, and I think Dominic Lewis went to Mount St. Mary's too. Obviously, things don't work. The grass isn't always greener when you go to UCLA or you go to Wisconsin. You have to come back down to reality and go down to the A10. I think they'll be solid for Valentine too. And the other thing about Valentine, he's starting to get a hold of this recruiting trail, just like Martinelli. They got a 4-star coming in, Chuck Love from La Lumiere in Indiana. I think he's going to be really cool. But yeah, I mean, I think that they're going to be centered around fast-paced offense, shooting at a dozen threes a half, and getting Miles Rubin as many lobs as you possibly can. And they're going to be really good on defense.
Nice. In terms of, like, you're talking about, like, some of these coaches kind of finding their groove with regards to recruiting and everything like that. And recruiting is no longer just from the prep scene. Obviously, the transfer portal is key. You go up and down the conference. There have been a lot of players that left the conference, and there are a lot of players that are entering the conference as transfers. In your opinion, just having kind of, been analyzing all the teams in the A10, is there any particular, like, incoming transfer that you think has the potential to have the biggest impact?
I think Adam Jai will be unbelievable at Dayton. I mean, he averaged 12 and 4 last year at Iona. He's a super fun playmaker, just really quick guard. He was at Donovan Mitchell's camp over the summer, and he made people look like a fool with his spin moves and how just crafty and weavy he can be on offense. I think that Fordham's got a really good player in DeJour Reeves, who also came from Iona. He's going to be like one of those tough as nails New York point guards who comes in the A10 and probably wrecks havoc for a Fordham team like that. There's so many good players coming in. It's kind of tough to say exactly who's going to be the newcomer of the year. I feel like they should, and nowadays with the transfer portal, they should just do an all-conference newcomer team, because you can't just pick one anymore. There's so many kids coming in and out of the conferences now where it's tough to say who's going to be the best. But yeah, I mean, I think those would be my top two for sure.
Let's flip it real quick. Let's flip it. Yeah. In the sense, so excluding like players that left because of like, graduation or perhaps entering like the NBA draft or whatever, which player that transferred out of the conference, like whose absence will be felt the most?
That's a tough one. I forget his first
I'm sure
name.
coaches will say there's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like they're all, but I mean,
I forget what his name was. He was he was at VCU last year. He left for Texas Tech, maybe like Batamose or something. I think he was really valuable, especially to what VCU was trying to build. He was only a freshman last year, and he was averaging like 2 blocks a game. He was 6'10". Yeah, Luke Bagaboy from England. He was really, really good last year, and now he's gone, unfortunately. It's tough to see, like, especially it's tough to see guys leave the A10, but it's tough to see guys who were like really good prospects. He only averaged 4 and 4, but I mean, just a defensive specimen who easily could improve. But now he might get caught behind players at the next stop at Texas Tech. So I thought he was going to be really cool to see in the A10 grow, but guys like that think that they're averaging 4 and 2 blocks is going to get them playing time in a Power 5 school. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but we'll see.
So when you spoke to the coaches, right, you obviously spoke to some coaches, and I know continuity has been a storyline amongst every league. Has been like, okay, we got to try to keep our guys and all that. Like George Mason, they lost pretty much everyone. What's your take on a team that has like a bunch of transfers like Mason versus a team that has some continuity? Like, do you think it can work in the A10 being a full-time transfer roster like George Mason has?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's tough I don't think people realize how tough it is to bring in 10 new guys who have never played together, never meshed together, and just go out there. I mean, yeah, you have a whole summer to practice and the fall barely to practice, but when you're familiar with guys and you have those guys who've played at your arenas and who have been around your fans and who have played in the A10 before, know the competition level, that's when you start off that much higher than a team like George Mason. Like, for example, like Javon Bennett, he's a 3-year guy at Dayton. Him staying at Dayton is one of the more valuable things that Dayton possibly could have had. I mean, yeah, they have 2 more returners, Juwan Simons and Jacob Connors, but those guys didn't play as much as Javon Bennett, who has March Madness experience. VCU guys who have March Madness experience come back, like Michael Belle. I mean, maybe he didn't play as much, 16 minutes per game, maybe in March Madness, but that experience is invaluable, in my opinion.
Nice. In terms of like experience and everything like that, from the coaching perspective, I don't know if this is probably necessarily going to make the magazine, but I'm always curious. As you said, like some of these coaches are kind of learning what's the most beneficial way for them to kind of either maintain or to recruit talent. Is there any like kind of nuggets of insight you want to share or that any coaches share with you in terms of like their recruiting strategy? Maybe how it's had to change given like, the landscape of just college basketball in general?
Yeah, I mean, Caputo and Mooney both talked about, retaining. And that's kind of what they set their standards at. They want to keep guys around who are familiar with the program and who, it's tough to go into, you get like 2 weeks to recruit these kids in the transfer portal and everybody's calling them, everybody's asking for them. So, I mean, I think that they really honed in on retaining and keeping guys around who are familiar with not just them, but familiar with the whole coaching staff and familiar with what it takes to play in the A10 and their arenas and such. So those two really honed in on that. Martinelli obviously is new, so he doesn't know exactly how to build a roster from being there for more than a year. So he talked about, still recruiting kids out of high school. And I mean, that's still what he's doing. And I think he does care about retention and familiarity too, because he brought 2 kids with him from Bryant who who have been with him for the last year or 2 years when he was assistant coach there too. So yeah, they really honed in on, what it takes in the A10 is not just a win, but, win with the guys that you're familiar with.
So when it comes to, you mentioned earlier about the conference potentially getting multiple bids for the NCAA tournament. Obviously that's been an issue for this league for a while now. They've been a one bid league. Mm-hmm. Do you honestly think that this is a multi-bid league this year, considering all the Power 5 stuff? And, obviously they're all going to get tons of bids. We know that. And the Mountain West potentially could be a multi-bid league, right?
Yep.
Do you really think there are multiple NCAA tournament teams in this conference?
Well, I mean, if it's St. Louis and St. Louis doesn't win the conference, I don't think so. Okay. Obviously, because St. Louis, I'm saying that because their non-conference schedule is complete dookie. But, I mean, teams like Dayton who challenge themselves and play Marquette, I think VCU's got a tough non-conference schedule. You have to – I mean, yeah, these Power 5s hate it now and they don't want to play A10 schools, but you have to challenge yourself and really put yourself out there and play these schools because that's how you get multiple bids. Because last year we only had one because George Mason didn't play a tough non-con and they didn't win the conference tournament. So that I think that's a reason why we didn't have two bids last year. I think this year, teams realized that George Washington put together a good non-conference schedule. Loyola Chicago has a good non-conference schedule. I think they even play Northwestern this year, maybe. But yeah, I mean, you have to play. I mean, yeah, you have to do it because you want to get multiple bids. But I think it's valuable to play these tough opponents early on in the season so you can realize what you have by playing hard opponents just because it forges them by the fire. I mean, you can't just keep playing these D2 and no-name programs and expect to make it in March,
Right. I mean, as like you guys just been saying, right? It'll be difficult. We know it's a one bid team. It'll be tough to get multiple. Something as you said, like the guys that did challenge themselves, they'd have to like really run the table. I don't know, run the table, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like they got to have some really signature wins against their non-conference opponents. But you mentioned earlier teams that you thought were kind of like sleepers, but for the teams who probably are likely not really going to be in the mix for, say, like the conference champion, what teams do you think, I don't know, for lack of a better word, spoiler, just teams that will absolutely, they're not really going to be in the mix for the conference champion, but they're absolutely like a tough out. Like they're probably going to surprise people that like they're a tougher out than expected, if there are any.
I think St. Bonaventure's obviously isn't going to win the conference. It isn't going to win the conference, but they're a team that's they have their head coach is always produced. I think that they'll be a team that kind of screws over somebody who wants to win the conference and they have tough losses to them. I think Fordham will be a team that also does that just because of the transfer portal class that they put together, just a bunch of experienced guys who want to come in and win right away. Those two for sure will be spoiler teams. But, I mean, maybe even Davidson could get some wins for sure in the A10. Definitely don't see them, winning out or being as good as people, being as good as the VCUs or the George Masons. But I think they'll be a team that kind of spoils some things. I mean, I talked to their coach. He likes what they have. I think Jaqual Roberts from Vanderbilt, he said, we've never had a guy like this before. A guy with this much athleticism, the guy who can have this much tenacity on the boards and bring a different kind of side to Davidson hoops that they've never had before. So they could be really interesting to see, mix it up a little bit. But yeah, those three teams for sure are teams I don't have up there, but could easily ruin some days in the A10.
Terrific. Well, before we move on to the MAC, are there any just kind of like any thoughts about the A10? Just something like maybe something fun you learned about either the teams, the coaches, just maybe something that's not necessarily X's and O's that makes the magazine.
I just think that the A10, it has coaches that have such good experience, like Caputo at Miami, Loyola Chicago, Valentine. He had experience overseas playing. It's a combination of guys who have been at their schools for so long, and now these young coaches who are trying to make a name for him, like Tony Skidden coming back to George Mason after playing there. He's young. Donahue's a bit unproven, but he's proven at Penn a little bit. At St. Louis, obviously has a younger coach in the A10. But yeah, it's just a bunch of coaches who are either been at their programs for quite a while and familiar with, what their tendencies are and players they want. And then there's those mix of guys who are eager to start taking over the A10 and winning out and winning these conference championships and such. And then also just how good the A10 has gotten over the years. You think about it with the Obi Toppins and Deron Holmes, and now Rasheer Fleming, Kobe Bryant making the NBA, Tumani Kamara, Jeff Doughton from Rhode Island was even on the Sixers. I think that it's just like such a growing league. And, I wouldn't mind, like the MAC and the Sun Belt, they did a thing this year where they're playing each team, one team from the Sun Belt's playing one team from the MAC, and it's kind of like a challenge. I would not mind seeing an A10 versus Big East challenge, because people are saying that Big East is so good. Well, I think it would be fun to see if they put their money where their mouth is and challenge the A10 to a couple games.
Look at that. They need you as like some kind of director, So
yeah,
they're in the pot. Love it. Love it.
All right. Well, there you go. Before we transition, a little shout out for Matt,
Yes, sir.
Boys are out.
But let's see. So moving on to the MAC, right? The Mid-American Conference. Just like we did for the A10, what are your initial just kind of general thoughts, your overview of the MAC heading into this season?
I watched a couple mid-major shows, especially the Field of 68, and last year they said that the bottom part of the MAC was some of the worst that they've seen in years. I mean, that's fair, but this is also such an exciting time for the MAC because this is the best it's been at the top in forever. Akron's obviously always good. Toledo's consistently good. Ohio, Kent State, super good normally. But I mean, now Miami, my alma mater, is now fighting for conference championships. I mean, the last time they were good was Wally Zerbiak was playing there. So, I mean, it's just now it's such an exciting time where it's becoming recognized as such a growing conference, not just in football, but now in basketball. Just think about the NBA draft picks in recent years. Ryan Rollins, he's now starting point guard for the Bucks last year. Ray J. Dennis on a two-way with the Pacers. Enrique Freeman, one of the best players in Mid-American Conference history, now on the T-Wolves. Amani Bates just got signed to a two-way with the Sixers or an Exhibit 10. He was the Eastern Michigan guy. So people don't realize how much fun the MAC is and how much it produces, not even just going into the NBA, but there's guys now, AJ Brown from Ohio University, he's playing for the reigning national championships at Florida. It's like they're getting plucked out by these big schools. Mark Sears played at OU. He was at Bama. So, I mean, it doesn't just – the MAC isn't just producing guys in the NBA, but they're producing guys who are going to go play Power 5 and play meaningful minutes for the Power 5s too.
Yeah, so going off that, there's obviously a lot of talent at the top of this league. Akron, Miami, Ohio, you mentioned. Can you just talk about some of the big name players at the top of the league there and how much they're going to help those teams?
Yeah, I mean, when you first think about the MAC, you think about, guys like Jackson Paveleski for Ohio, who came from Iowa State, really good point guard. He's one of the better ones. Tavari Johnson at Akron, he's really, really good. Tossed his name in the portal, came back. I think he's probably second in the running for me for player of the year. Peter Suter is my pick by a long shot. I talked to Travis Steele over the summer, really good coach. And, he told me that like the day after the season when Miami got screwed over and didn't make the crown or the NIT or anything, they had to have player meetings because, you got to get an understanding of where these guys' heads are at. He said Peter Suter walked in after averaging like 13 6-4 last year for Miami. He came in, sat down, and said, "Coach, I'm staying. Like, I've never played this good of basketball in my life. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else." So a guy like that, who loyalty still exists, and he's a guy who is just so fun to watch because he's so intelligent on the basketball court, making the right reads, knowing when to pull up and take his jump shot, knowing when to come off the screen and go hard down court. I mean, he had like a 60-point game last year or something. I forget exactly the number, but he's super fun to watch, and I think he's easily the pick for player of the year.
Nice. I mean, like, as you were saying, right, in terms of some of these tools, like the loyalty going both ways, because, Akron, they won the conference last year. They got the tournament bid. They actually have gotten the MAC tournament bid 3 out of the last 4 years.
Yes, sir.
Last year, right, they went 17-1 in the conference, in their conference record, right? And they pretty much returned almost their entire like main rotation, right? With a couple of, players that players on the back end of the roster who didn't see as many minutes transferred out. And obviously some couple players that graduated. But can you kind of speak to kind of like what maybe what their coach or, what the team's kind of, obviously the expectation is to try to repeat, but in terms of how can they continue to build off of what was pretty much as successful a season as it could get,
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing about Akron that's going to be tough is they've lost now pretty much everybody besides Tavari Johnson, guys who were on that first championship team. Because, I mean, Nate Johnson, he experienced it. He played critical minutes in the first 2 championships. Obviously, he transferred to Kansas State, which really hurt because, when the portal first came out, every single player besides – I think one, Josiah Harris, who was hurt last year, who transferred to Cleveland State, said, "Run it back." And, Akron fans, especially even me, I was super hyped. I was like, wow, that doesn't happen in mid-major ball. You don't return every single player. And then Nate Johnson tosses his name in the transfer portal, gets paid 6 figures to go play at Kansas State. And Conquo went to Utah, unfortunately. But I think that they returned guys who love Akron. Who love playing at the Jar and who love the fan base and who love just continuing to win at the highest level. Shema Scott, 6th man of the year last year. Tavari Johnson is going to be great. I think Amani Lyles is easily their most important player just because he's he's one of 2 bigs on the team. I think that they got a good transfer class. I mean, I think they got guys who are going to fill needs. Evan McAfee from OSU. People obviously don't think he has much offense, but his defense is really, really good. Cody Head, who's a serviceable backup guard. Chabi Beret from Duquesne, who will be a good backup big. You just need guys who, especially when you're returning all these players, you need guys who are going to come in and know their role and fill in for what's needed. And I think what's great about John Gross, their head coach, is he recruits kids from the area who want to stay in Ohio and play basketball in front of their family and their friends. So I think he's one of the best coaches, not even in just mid-major, but in the country. And if he wanted to go somewhere else, he could, but he loves Akron that much and he stays.
So you're a Miami, Ohio grad. Obviously their team is going to be right in the mix, as we know. Is this a boom or bust year for them? Like, is this the year that they, need to, not need to make the tournament, but does this kind of feel like the year for Travis Steele in that group?
I think it feels like the year that they need to solidify that they're a real team in the conference. Because, the thing about the teams that have been at the top for so long, Akron, Toledo, Ohio, Kent State, they have the fan base to support their winning. It's tough to go play at the Jar because the fans show up, the student body shows up at every single game. Miami didn't have that. They were horrible for so long that obviously the student body did not care. And they did, the student body always talks about how much they want to have sports there. And that's the only thing they miss. Well, now you have it. You have a real coach who legit can win and who is legit about everything he does. And you have the talent to do so. So I think that this is the year where they're going to probably push all the chips into the table so they can establish themselves as a true team. He's identified what the culture is there, and he said the culture is simply this: I want guys who I'm familiar with. I'm not going to go into the transfer portal every year and get these guys who I've met for a week and bring them into my house and trust them to play for me and trust them to, be a good teammate because I don't know them. So I think that's why he's really stuck to his guns about recruiting freshmen. He brought in 5 freshmen this year, and he's not scared to play them. He played Brant Byers and Skaljic last year just as much as he played the starters, and Byers won freshman of the year. They lose Cam Kraft, who was essential to their run last year. I think Brant Byers is going to fill in really nicely for him. Maybe not the most dynamic of a shooter as Kraft was, but I think he's going to be really good, especially in year 2. I think Skaljic and Epsaro are going to be really good at the point guard position. You lose Reese Potter, which is, it's all right. He was a serviceable backup big. Went to Kentucky where he probably won't play. But I think Antoine Wolford will cover up the middle just fine, just like he did last year. And their freshman big will be able to take the load off of him. I think Makai Cooper leaving was silly. I thought he was a really good point guard for them, and now he's at Lindenwood. So Skaljic and Opsara will have to fill in for him, and maybe a couple like the point guards from, the new recruitment class like Trent Perry. But I think that they have what they need to win now. They got a good transfer from Bradley, who's going to play the 4-3 for them, who's a good shooter, maybe a small ball 5, Almar, Atlison. So I think they're going to be really solid. I think they got a great team, and I think that this is the year where they prove themselves as a real team in the MAC for sure.
Yeah, I was actually just about to ask you about Almar Atlison. With him now in the fold, I'm assuming he's going to be definitely part of the main rotation. That's at least, if you exclude the freshmen, that's at least what, I think 5, 6 players that shoot better than 38% from 3. Mm-hmm. I don't know. You're the expert. Is it fair to say that, hey, right, this team is definitely built for some kind of 5-out lineups? Or
sure, I think it'll be a 4-out, 1 in. Wolford can't shoot, but he's a really good big to play inside, and that's what you need when you have 4 guys who can flat out shoot the ball like Byers. Put Byers in the corner, he's lights out. Let Suter run the point if he needs to. If he doesn't, put him on the off ball and let Epsaro do it, because Epsaro is going to find you. He's a selfless player. He's been a captain since he was a sophomore. And yeah, I think it's going to be a really fun team. They're obviously going to shoot the crap out of the ball just like they did last year. And I think they have the bigs to, bang around inside and get the boards and, play tough defense. And I think that's where they lacked last year was their defense. But I think Ian Elmer's going to take a step up. Obviously forgot about mentioning him, and he's one of their best players. But I think he's going to take a step up defensively, and he did last year. He always had the toughest assignment. He was always on Nate Johnson in those Akron matchups. He was always on Von Cameron in those Kent State matchups. He is easily the key to how good Miami can be because his X factor defensively. He's going to give you 12, 14 a night, but what he does defensively is going to really determine how much they win in the MAC for sure.
So they added UMass this year, new member, obviously going from one league you're covering to another league you're covering.
Yep.
Talk to me about the impact that UMass is going to have in this league, as opposed to where they would have been in the A10. Do you like their chances better in the MAC than in the A10? And give me your overall thoughts of what Frank Martin's put together.
Frank Martin's a fun coach. I think he's going to be really entertaining to see in the MAC. I don't know if they're going to be that good. I think it's going to stir some things up for sure. I didn't think they were going to be. I'm really glad that they got out of the A10 when they did because it wasn't really looking pretty for their outlook. But they got a 4-star coming in, Dwayne Wimbley from St. Thomas Aquinas in Fort Lauderdale. He's going to be pretty cool. They got another 3-star point guard. But I think that if there's any sleeper in the MAC, it's Marcus Banks Jr., who comes from UMBC. That kid is legit. He'll probably be the newcomer of the year. He averaged back-to-back, I think, 17, 16 points a game at UMBC. He's going to be really fun to watch. But I don't know if they're going to crack. Maybe they'll crack the top 5. But I don't know if they'll probably be middle of the pack, if anything, just because of how good the top 5-6 teams in the MAC are.
With regards to, like, I mean, the nature of our little MAC segment here is we're kind of assuming that Akron and Miami will kind of be like the front runners of the conference. But last year, I don't know. I feel like Kent State had some big moments there. Ultimately, I think they finished I want to say 11-7. I'm right. Yeah, 11-7 in the conference. But, in some of their non-conference games, they kind of showed out.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think their outlook is for this upcoming season?
Yeah, I have them around 3 or 4. I think it's going to be between them and Ohio for who's at 3. I think that Kent State got better this year. I mean, yeah, they lost Von Cameron Davis, and they lost Sellinger, who was easily their most toaster oven scorer on that team. He was, if he had a hold of the ball and he felt good, he was spraying it. But they kept a lot of guys too. They kept Sion Medley, leading assist per game guy, Delrico Gillespie, leading rebounder, kept Jamal Sumlin, who was solid for them last year. But then they get back Morgan Stafford, who played at Miami previously. He was out last year with an injury, and Brendan Moss, who was also out with an injury last year. They got an interesting transfer portal too. I think that they killed it. Ravon Griffith, I don't know if you guys remember him, was a 4-star, went to Cincinnati, didn't play. I think he's going to be awesome. I think he's my pick for newcomer of the year. He's just a really, really athletic, talented player who's going to come into the MAC, and I think he's going to absolutely destroy. Because it's guys like that who, maybe they don't get their chance at the school that they first initially thought they would. Maybe it was because they weren't good enough, which I don't think is the case. I think he's great. I think it was just coaching. Wes Miller is probably on the outs if he doesn't win this year. So he leaves there. All I've heard is good things about the kid he is. He's from the Cincinnati area, so I'm really excited about him. And then they got a real big dog from UNLV, Rob Whaley Jr. He was out last year. He averaged 7.5 the year before. He's 6'7", 290. That guy might kill somebody in the MAC. So he should be interesting to see. But yeah, Kent State will be fun. I think that it kind of disproved them last year when Miami beat them 3 times, twice during the season, once in the conference tournament, and then they make the tournament. Doesn't make any sense to me. They make the NIT and Miami doesn't. It's always a dogfight between them and Akron, so that those games will always be fun. But yeah, Kent State will be solid for sure.
I believe, didn't they get Jahari Williamson?
I'm not 100% sure. Maybe.
Zach, he can rail threes, man. I remember that guy too. So, right from Niagara. I know.
They did. I think.
Yeah. No, he's there. You're right.
Yeah, dude. He's got a quick trigger in a good way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, super fun team for sure.
Nice. Well, I mean, I think this has been great. Before we wrap this up, do you have any again, same thing, kind of interesting nuggets that coaches or players kind of shared about the MAC?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ohio's going to be super solid. I talked to Coach Bulls last week. That just a super gritty rebounding team with a guy who can just sling the rock and find his people, rolling to the rim and everything. They got a bunch of good guys. Toledo will be fun. I think that Austin Parks and Chris Riddle, 2 Power 5 guys dropping down, they'll be really cool to see. Austin Parks played Ohio State. Riddle played DePaul. So a little bit unproven. They didn't play much there. But they bring in Kyler Van Datter from Central Michigan, who was probably my pick for 6th man of the year if Shema Scott wasn't. And then they got another guy from IUP UI, Sean Craig, who's also proven. So they'll be fun. Just a lot of fun teams in the MAC. They got Javante Campbell, who will be great at BG, probably Defensive Player of the Year pick for me. And then Western Michigan, maybe they won't be as good, but I think they're going to be super interesting just because they have 3 bigs in the league, and they'll probably wreak havoc inside. Just 6'10" dudes and bigger, and they'll just probably have an infiltrate going in. So look out for them. But yeah, super fun league. awesome coaches I got to talk to, and really excited to see it get rocking.
Terrific. Well, I think that concludes this installment of our college season preview. Right? This is the preview to the magazine, which I encourage all of our viewers, our listeners, right? If you go to the Center Hub's X profile, the Center Hub _BB at the top, right? We have it pinned. It is all the information, how you can buy this magazine, the link. It's only $12. You know, that's $12 for all 365 Div 1 schools. I mean, I'm not going to do the math. You could do the math. That's quality, right? You know, so yeah. With that said, be sure to follow Andrew at Schaeffer and Bake. Follow Matt at HoopHound5, and you can follow me if you want to. All right. Take care, and we will see you again, same time on Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 Eastern. I'm not going to lie. I don't know which conference we're talking about on Thursday, but it'll be great because all of our contributors are on top of it. All right. Take care, everyone.